Coprophagia has a number of reasons as to why a dog might exhibit that particular behavior. So I'm going to be covering a couple of these, and I'm going to be going over what exactly I went over with the owner. So the owner contacted me about training for Professor and Doc, both out of the same household, and standard training, obedience training, potty training, typical stuff for a young dog. Additionally, the one thing that was brought up as a concern was the habit that this dog Professor had of eating poop, right? Which is a bit of a problem. It's definitely one of those things that we do not like to see. We don't like to see our dogs doing it, especially when we love our dogs. We like to spend time with our dogs. We like our dogs to be close to us. The last thing we want to picture is them just eating a pile of shit just like 5 minutes ago. So when this got brought up, rather than us just jumping the gun and going, this is how we address it, what I want to know is, I wanted to know some of the dietary habits that this dog had. So I don't like to just go, the dog is doing this, let's do this. I don't like doing that because it can be a little bit irresponsible. What I like to do instead is I like to ask, what is your dog eating right now? Right? How long has your dog been doing this? Does it do it on an empty stomach? Does it do it after it eats? There's so many things that we can go into. So what I like to know is, I like to know what, like primarily the big thing that I want to know is, what is the dog eating? I want to know what the diet is. Is it kibble? What kind of kibble is it? Is it raw? Okay, what goes into it? Is it cooked? What goes into it? And the reason that the diet is the very first question that we're going to ask is because one of the reasons dogs eat poop, there's a number of them. I'm going to go over a couple here in a moment. But one of the main reasons a dog will eat poop is if there is a dietary deficiency. If there's a dietary deficiency, that is going to trigger this habit of eating poop. That's going to trigger that desire. It's going to trigger that instinct to just eat shit, right? Eat poop. So if there is a dietary deficiency, dogs are going to eat a bunch of things. They're going to eat paper, they're going to eat grass, they're going to eat things that you would imagine this dog should not be eating, that this is not even palatable. There is nothing edible about it. Why is the dog eating that? One of the main things, dietary deficiency. Additionally, if the dietary deficiency is not a problem, there could be some sort of digestive issue. Maybe it's not what is going into the animal that is not sufficient, but maybe there is something going on here. So if the dog is obsessive about it, like if the dog is eating it like it really craves it, like it really wants it, that is usually a red flag, right? To me, if the dog is looking for it, and especially a young dog, if the dog is 3 years old and it's been eating poop for like 3 years, fine, we could say it's a bad habit and it's become a really bad habit. But if it's a young dog like this dog is, less than a year old, and he started to be obsessive about it, that would really make me consider that there is something off, there's something wrong in the digestive process here. But what we deducted here is that it was possibly a dietary deficiency. Now, dietary deficiency doesn't necessarily mean that the nutrients are not all there. There's a little bit of a footnote on the dietary deficiency. The nutrients might be on top, like they might be exactly what the dog needs to consume. But if the microbiome is not all there, is not all diverse, this could also trigger the dog eating poop, because it just makes total sense, right? If the dog wants additional bacteria to compensate for maybe antibiotic treatment that it's had in the past, number of things, medication, etc., sickness, anything. If the dog tries to compensate for that, what they'll do a lot of times is they'll eat things off the ground, which there is nothing intrinsically wrong about that. There is really Dogs do that. Every animal does that. You'll see dogs or animals in general, they'll pick through the ground constantly. If you look at birds, they're doing that constantly. You look at children, young children are constantly spending time outside, and you see young children that are not on their technology, they're not on their phone or their tablets or their TV. If you notice them playing outside, they're spending a lot of time out on the ground, right? They're putting things in their mouth, they're grabbing things, they're scratching their face. There's a lot of microbiome activity. There's a lot of good bacteria and sometimes bad bacteria that makes it into the system. So what happens is when the dog has a bacterial deficiency that could aid its digestion, they will compensate by eating poop. We could argue that eating poop is bad, but in reality, if it satisfies something within the animal to compensate for their digestive system, it's really not bad, right? If the dog eating rabbit pellets, rabbit poop, or deer poop makes it feel better, if it solidifies their poop in their digestive system, there's really nothing wrong with that. The problem is when it's excessive. Like if the dog is constantly going, I'm just looking for poop so that I can eat it. That again will trigger a red flag that will make me believe maybe there is something else happening there. Maybe there is something that is triggering that. Another reason that could be happening is there's a couple of reasons that are very well known. So like if a dog is a very clean animal, meaning like it really likes to poop in a poop area and it really likes to keep its living area very clean, sometimes what they'll do is if they happen to poop in their living area, if they happen to poop in their crate, because they don't like the fact that there is poop right there in their proximity, they will sometimes eat it. Now, this is an occasional thing, meaning they're not constantly out looking for poop. What happens is it's situational. So if they happen to poop in their area, if they happen to poop in their sleeping area, if they happen to poop in their crate, what they'll do is they'll go, man, I just don't like that poop right there. I just got to clean it up. And so they'll eat it. So that's one of the reasons sometimes they'll eat poop. But that is a situational matter. Another reason sometimes they'll do it is when moms are nursing their pups. This is very common. This is practically every animal will do this. They'll clean their puppies, right? The moms will clean their puppies. They'll lick the anus so that they can stimulate some of that bowel movement. And when the puppy poops, they'll clean the puppy. So this is another instance in which it happens. So eating poop in itself is not wrong per se. Okay, we've already established a couple of reasons as to why they do it. One, to keep their environment clean. Two, as a maternal instinct. Three, they'll do it to compensate for microbiome deficiency or to add diversity to the microbiome. So these are reasons as to why they'll do it. They'll make themselves feel better, and it's perfectly okay. When we have a dog, however, where he's like, you know, I just feel like eating poop just because I want to, then we address everything from top to the bottom. So we go, okay, let's address possibly the dietary deficiency. So what the owner did something very responsible, switched her dogs from a standard dog food to a much nicer dog food, you know, actual cooked food, and that was a great step toward it. Another step that the owner took is the owner also added probiotics to their diet. So the probiotics definitely help. Obviously, probiotics goes directly into the digestive system. It adds diversity to the microbiome, and then this problem can be alleviated. Additionally, what I recommended to the owner is to do a stool sample of her dog. So you can actually do this. There are companies that will take your dog's stool sample and they'll basically inspect it to see exactly what type of bacteria could be missing in their microbiome. And then what they'll do is they'll basically give you a list of specific probiotics that your dog needs to satisfy that particular deficiency. Now, probiotics, I'm going to go a little bit on a tangent here, but probiotics come in a couple of forms. Most probiotics that you buy for human consumption and probiotics that you buy for your pet, basically probiotics that come from the veterinary clinic or from the shelves at a store. These probiotics are made in a lab. Okay, they're made in a petri dish. If you buy those probiotics, there is nothing wrong with it. It definitely does help. There's a different type of probiotic, and the other type of probiotic is from fecal transplant. If you want to look this up, you can go for it. I'm not going to go in depth here, but fecal transplants are actually the purest form of probiotics. It is the purest probiotic therapy. Okay, and it's worked on humans with tremendous efficacy, and it's also worked on animals. So if you do have a problem with your dog is consistently losing weight, consistently, doesn't matter what kind of food you give it, and they're constantly pooping a lot of food, even if the food is top notch, and they constantly have digestive problems, it might be time to go that route, to go the stool sample route and the fecal transplant route. Okay, the fecal transplant route, basically the bacteria comes directly from a healthy donor sample. And it is done, again, in a very specific, clean way. So it's not like, it's not like they're just shipping you a pile of turd for you to feed your dog. It's done in a much cleaner, hygienic way than that. But essentially, that's what is happening. So when dogs do that, when dogs are actually looking for poop, essentially that's what they're doing. They're giving themselves a fecal transplant. Okay? So this is one of the things that could be happening. But also, we have to consider the behavioral aspect of eating poop. Okay, the behavioral aspect of this is, it might have started as a dietary deficiency. It might have started as a microbiome deficiency. It might have started as a digestive issue. But dogs being dogs, they do also tend to fall into habits, which means it worked one time, it addressed the problem, the owner addressed the problem, meaning the owner, changed the dog's diet, the owner took the dog to the vet, made sure that the digestive system was good to go, and then additionally, everything was done in order to ensure that nutritionally, digestive-wise, microbiome-wise, everything was great, but the dog still decided to go, you know what? It's actually not that bad. I might actually keep eating poop just because, what the heck, why not? So here's what happened with Professor. I had Professor here for 5 weeks, okay, and I gave him plenty of opportunities to explore, okay, meaning there was poop here and there, okay, and I just gave him plenty of opportunities to explore and go, hey dude, there is poop, I just want to see what you do. I'm not going to tell you not to do it, I'm not going to micromanage you, I actually wanted to see it. I actually wanted to see it. So what Professor would do is, he would just sniff. He was like very, very excited about sniffing the ground, not the poop, but the ground, which very, very common. Like, I live in 5 acres here. There is a lot going on. So dogs that come here, like, they smell the ground. They're like, oh my God, this is so different than the soil that I'm used to at home. So it's natural for dogs to do that. So Professor was doing that. He was just like, oh man, like, this smells so interesting. And then he found another spot on the ground. This smells so interesting. But still, he was not committing to eating poop. Just not doing it. Again, remember what I said earlier. If I saw that he was actively hunting for it, that would be a bit of a red flag for me. That's when I would tell the owner, hey, maybe really do a thorough check on the dog, because he's doing it like he's starving for it. If he looks like he's starving for it, I want to take him to the vet. But Professor was not doing that. He was just casually going, this smells good, this smells good, this smells good. Finally, at the 5th week, he did this right here. And so what happened, you're going to see in the video, is the moment he goes for it, there's a correction. This is addressing the behavioral aspect of why is he eating poop. Let's assess first, is the diet there? Maybe not. Okay, let's make sure the diet is proper. Okay, maybe we need to switch into a better diet. Is possibly the microbiome need to be addressed? Add probiotics to the diet, right? If you want to go further, do the fecal sample and send it to one of these labs. You're not going to get these from your veterinarians, by the way. This is something you have to kind of research, Google a little bit, and then you'll get some results. Your veterinarian, a lot of times, might be a little bit reluctant to go that route. They'll just go, your dog is fine, just give him some probiotics and he's good to go. And they'll probably tell you, give him some science diet because we have it here on the shelves. So let's just give him that and he'll be good to go. So some of this stuff you have to do your own research. But make sure that all of those check marks are crossed, okay? Make sure that all of those possible scenarios are X'd out. Like, we want to make sure that it's not a diet deficiency, because if he did have a dietary deficiency and I just corrected him for eating poop, that would not be fair. If he had a microbiome deficiency and we just go, hey, let's just correct you for eating poop, it would not be fair. If there was a digestive issue within the animal and that's why he felt like he needed to eat poop, there was an issue with the pancreas, with the enzymes, and that was the reason he wanted to eat poop, and we corrected him for it, it obviously wouldn't be fair. We want to check all of these steps first and go, we can safely assume that it is none of these things because we've addressed all of these things. Now what we have left is the behavioral aspect of it. So here's what we do. The dog gets near it and we wait. We don't say anything. The moment the dog goes, you know what, there it is, I'm gonna sink my teeth on it, and the moment they sink their teeth on it, you don't say anything. You let them do it and then you deliver a correction with the electronic collar. Why the electronic collar? It's very simple, because it is impersonal. It's impersonal, meaning the dog will not associate it to me. The dog will not go, I'm gonna eat this piece of crap, and the moment I eat it, man, I felt a correction. The dog is not gonna go, it was you, wasn't it? Because the e-collar delivers a non-directional, impersonal correction. Okay, meaning it's between the dog and the poop. It's like the dog ate the poop and it tasted horrible. Okay, this is what we would call an unconditioned punishment. The dog does not need to know what it is, does not need to understand where it's coming from or what it means. The dog just needs to go, that was a bad experience. So what happens is that dog goes, "Puh," right? They spit it out and they're like, I don't know what that was, that tasted horrible. And you don't say a word, nothing. It is very important that you don't say anything, because the moment you go, the moment you go, no, the moment you do any of those things, what happens is the dog goes, it was you, you did it. And here is what will happen next. The dog will not eat poop in front of you. But the moment you're not there, they're gonna do it. Okay, this is why you cannot be involved in this correction, because if you are, that correction will be connected to you. So you don't say anything. You can be there. When I did these corrections, I was there. I had to watch them. Right, my wife was recording, but there was no feedback from us. The only feedback he got was when he eats it, there's a correction. And the correction has to be at a high level. Now in this particular example, I'm using Sport Dog. The Sport Dog has 7 levels. Technically it has 14 levels, but in this case it only has 7 levels because we're sharing that collar with the other dog, which means we only have 7 levels. Level 1 is his baseline level. It's not really a correction. Level 7, you would imagine, being the highest level, is a very painful correction. So we didn't go to 7. We went to like 3 or 4. Okay, so kind of like halfway between not quite a correction and a freaking big correction, which is 7, right? The highest level that this collar has. So we didn't go to 7. It was kind of in the middle because I want to gauge the dog's reaction. Because if the dog eats it and I hit him on 3 or 4, and he's like, that was uncomfortable, but it's not a big deal, then I know, okay, I can go more now, I can go higher. Okay? And if I go to 3 or 4 and the dog eats it and the dog goes, shit, that was so freaking uncomfortable, then I know, okay, it was meant to be that way anyhow. It's supposed to be uncomfortable anyway. But if I happen to go too much, if 3 or 4 happen to be way too high, then I know to dial it down a little bit. Which, knowing this dog for 5 weeks, I knew that wasn't the case. I knew that dog very well. I knew what level was enough, what level was way too much, and I knew exactly where to put him on. So if you do this with your dog, you might have to gauge this a little bit. So if you have to do this with your own dog, I want to reiterate again, ensure that it is not a dietary deficiency, ensure that it is not a microbiome deficiency, ensure that it's not a pancreatic issue or some sort of digestive issue. Ensure that all of that is taken care of, address all those things first, and then you will either see improvement or the dog will keep doing it. Once the dog is still kind of going on and on about it, get a proper e-collar, an electronic collar that is a good quality, and then go to a mid-range level, not the highest, okay, sort of mid-range. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. It's supposed to taste bad. You're adding the taste, right? And the taste is bad because at this point, they don't mind the taste. If you've addressed all these problems and they're still going after poop, they're clearly telling you they don't mind the taste. So what you have to do is you have to make them mind the taste by adding discomfort. And when you do add it, go to mid-range level. And when you do it, you're out of the equation, meaning emotionally you're not involved. You have to be there, obviously, to push the button, but you're not saying anything. You're not telling them no, you're not gasping, you're not gonna go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You're not doing any of that. You have to discipline yourself to just watch, observe, and the moment it happens, you push that button, you're gonna watch your dog jump, and you're gonna be like, that was meant to happen. It's supposed to taste bad. So what happens is, Professor then moves on. You'll see him, he'll move on. Now, what happened after he moved on? He decided, hey, you know what? I'm gonna give this one a try. And we repeated the session. Why do they do that? Because it doesn't always happen the first time. The solution sometimes takes more than 1 repetition. As a matter of fact, it takes more than 1 repetition. So a lot of times the dogs will go, you know, I have so much reward history up to this point, right? Like, I poop successfully, I ate poop successfully, I ate poop successfully. I've done this for so many months. Now I ate poop and obviously it was bad. They're not gonna go at that one time that it was bad and go, I'm gonna ignore all the several times that it was good. What they're gonna do is they're gonna discard this as maybe it was just an accident. And they're gonna try it again because the reward history is there. So they're gonna try it again, and you have to be on top of it. So we're on top of it and we let the dog know, hey, go ahead, man, do whatever you gotta do. Because the moment they do it again, they have now another experience piling on top of the other. And then we're gonna do it again. And you'll notice the dog will take less and less chances. Suddenly the bad experiences, okay, are going to be much more memorable. Even if he's done it successfully like 50 times, the 3 to 4 to 5 times that it was done and it was delivered with a correction, that suddenly becomes more memorable. That suddenly becomes more important, more impactful. And that's how we address this. But this is pretty much one of the ways to address that. You address it by addressing the dog itself. And if that doesn't do it, now you're left with the behavior. How do we address the behavior? We use unconditioned punishment. We don't distract them. Distracting them is not going to do anything. It's just going to give you a false sense of security. If you go, hey, no, Fido, look, click, 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 I got food. If you do that, you're not actually addressing it. You're simply distracting it. But then what's going to happen is it's going to be there because next time you're not there, you're not paying attention, and they see another pile of poop that you forgot to pick up, it's going to go in their mouth because you're not going to always be there to distract them. What you have to do is you have to let them know, go ahead and eat it. But when you do, there's going to be an immediate consequence that is not related to me at all. It is directly tied to the poop, to the behavior itself. I hope this makes sense. Before you attempt this, let's keep in mind a couple of things. One, when you select the proper e-collar, make sure it's fully operational. Make sure it's fully charged. Make sure it's on. Make sure you know how to use it. Make sure you understand what the mid-range levels are that I talked about. This is not the highest possible level. We don't want to blast the dog into space because it might create a different association. For instance, we don't want the dog to think being in the backyard is bad. We just want the dog to go eating the poop is bad. For that reason, we're going to start with the mid-range level. So if you have 100 levels, start between 40 and 50. Okay, that might be quite a bit for your dog, or it might not be enough. But the 40 and 50 out of the 100, right, this is sort of the mid-range level. What it does is it gives the dog a reason to go, that was unpleasant, maybe I should not do that again. If it's too low, if you were too conservative and you go, I'm going to go just a third of the way, right? Or maybe like a quarter of the way. If you're a little bit too conservative, it could work. If you have a sensitive dog, it could work. But it could also make the dog go, this is not bad at all, not one bit. So I might just do it again and again and again. And you'll notice you'll be doing it way too frequently. If you're doing it too frequently, it's an indication that your level is probably not high enough. So if you opt to go for less than halfway of the collar's full potential, you might run into that. Additionally, you might also run into the dog adapting to those levels. So if you decide to go to 20 or 25 out of 100 and the dog goes, okay, that wasn't too bad, I'm going to try it again. And then you go again, okay, that wasn't too bad, I'm going to try it again. What will happen is 25 out of 100 will very soon lose its power. The dog will eventually go, I don't really care so much about 25. And then where you'll go is then you'll have to go a little bit higher. So in order to avoid that, it's best to not be too conservative. It's best to just go, hey, this is going to be uncomfortable. Okay, this is exactly how they do other types of trainings that I've talked about in this library before, where we go, okay, we want the dog to have an unpleasant experience. So we don't want to go necessarily 100% full power of the e-collar, although sometimes in some instances that might be necessary. But at least let's go halfway. Once we go halfway, the dog will tell you, whoa, that was ridiculously high. Then you bring it down to like a quarter of the way on the next repetition. But if you go to halfway and the dog goes, that wasn't too bad, then what you do is you go to 3/4 of the way of the full potential. Okay, pay attention to that. And if 3/4 of the way is not enough, then you go full potential of the collar. This varies from dog to dog. I need to emphasize this quite a bit. And if this is way too much for you to figure out, if this is a little bit too much of a detailed information for you to wrap your head around, then don't attempt to do this without professional help. If this is something you don't feel like doing, don't do it. But if you do decide to do it, I want to give you all the information that I could possibly give you, because I'm not there with you. I don't know your dog very likely, and you might not even know me. So if we're going just off of this video, pay attention to this. Watch it a couple of times if you need to before you commit. So that's the one thing we have to keep in mind. The other thing too is you have to make sure that the dog does not pair the correction to the electronic collar. So in the video, I talked about how to make it impersonal. I talked about how to make sure the dog doesn't connect the correction to you. But additionally, make sure the dog does not tie the correction to the e-collar. I made a video. I'm going to link it and I'm going to show you the picture here. But I made a video on what happens when your dog becomes collar smart. What happens when your dog knows the e-collar is on. And in that same video, I go over how to prevent that from happening. So not going to give you the whole detail there, but watch that video, okay? You don't want the dog to realize that it should not eat poop only when the e-collar is on. If the dog realizes, if the dog has a hint that, okay, this is because of the e-collar, then you're not addressing the problem. You're just giving yourself a false sense of security. So make sure you address that. Watch the video. But essentially, to shorten it up, you want to make sure that you're just basically not putting it on, do the correction, and then take it off when you're done. That's a big no-no. The dog will know it came from the collar. It won't take them long to figure that out. So those are the main things. Make sure that your e-collar is fully operational. You're familiar with the functions of the e-collar. Also make sure that you're doing halfway, okay, the half range of your electronic collar. So if you have 100 levels, go to 50. If you have 127 levels, do the math there. Okay, if you have 21 levels, do the math there. If you have 7 levels, do the math there. Okay, somewhere halfway between those levels. If your collar goes, well, I only have 7 levels, I don't have halfway, then do a bit of an estimate, which is what I did in that example. So I went from, I had 1 through 7. Obviously, I don't have a halfway level there, so I just go to 3 or 4. Okay, so mid-range, whatever your collar is. And also make sure that the dog doesn't pair up the correction to the e-collar. Other little things that I want to keep in mind, that I want you to keep in mind, is, again, for the fourth time in this video, ensure that it is not a medical issue. Ensure that it is not a dietary deficiency. Ensure that it is not a pancreatic issue, a digestive issue, a microbiome issue. Ensure that that's what's actually not causing the problem. If those things are causing the problem, you correcting the dog is not really fixing the problem. What it's doing is it's just putting a temporary patch, because if they're having a dietary deficiency or if they're having some sort of digestive issue, they're gonna find a way to keep doing it. And if you constantly macromanage where you make it so that they're never able to do it, you're not addressing the problem. The problem will exhibit itself somewhere else. So the medical aspect of this cannot be ignored. I'm simply showing you how to address the behavioral aspect of this once all of those things have been covered.